What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Josh Dolsa. Today we're going to be talking about a vintage box fan topic that no one's ever talked about before. I don't think. I'm 99% sure I'm the first, unless there's some thread on a forum that I don't know about. But as far as YouTube goes, I know I'm probably the first. So, this is not a versus video. This is not any other type of video. I know I have very blue box fans in front of me, right? We got the blue bladed Galaxy, we got the very blue Super Electric. But today's video, I'm not really going to be talking about the fans. I'm going to be talking about their motors, more or less. Because both of these fans have a very interesting motor design. And this fan over here has a motor that has kind of some misconception. I don't know. So I'm just going to be talking about these fans' motors and why I think this is a little weird. And you might see why too, that this is a little interesting. It's kind of a mystery that's kind of went unsolved, and I'm going to discuss it today. I have a lot of points to bring up, a lot of theories to make here. So this is going to be a very theoretical fan video. And if you care about box fans or you care about whatever, this is going to be really interesting because not many people talk about fan myths or theories with motors or really anything else. And obviously these two fans in front of me have really nothing in common. So without further ado, let me grab my flashlight and we'll be in business here. I'm also going to turn the fans around because we don't care about the front today. We care about the back. Now, if you know me long enough, you might just know what I'm about to talk about, but we'll see. So now I inspire you to take a nice look at these two motors in here. Now, I know this one here is hard to see, but that's why I got a flashlight, so I can light up the motor a bit. And I just like you to look at them and notice anything similar. Or if, something kind of stands out to you. And I'll even zoom in a little bit. I'm going to shine that light on that black one. And tell me if you notice anything a little strange. Right? Don't they look the same? Now, you're probably thinking, oh, who cares? They look the same. No one cares. They're probably the same motor. Well, they're not. And the reason why I'm making this video is because nobody seems to realize that this is a thing. And this exists, right? People just call this the plastic motor or a Marco motor, which I'm going to talk about a lot in this video because I don't think it's a Marco, but whatever. And then nobody seems to challenge this fan's motor. Seemingly no one has ever sat down and said, you know what? This motor looks pretty familiar. I mean, come on. Am I really the only one to notice this? I mean, come on. So that's why I'm going to be making this video. I want to know more about these motors. I want to know why they look the same. I want to know who makes these motors and just what the heck is happening here. So luckily, last year, if you've been keeping up with my channel, you would have known that for an art and journalism project, I graphically designed in Illustrator the popular vintage box fan motors. I have, almost anything you can think of in here, besides any oddballs that no one cares about, such as like my Champion. There's that weird motor in there, but in here includes two Super Electric motors, including the black one that's sitting right there in front of me. It also includes, on the first page, the motor over here, this one. And the reason why I have this book is so I can show you some motors I don't have, like the 70s Marco. So, yeah. So I have on a piece of paper written in different points for this video. So we're going to start off with what is the current controversy of these motors, specifically referring to this one. So what's currently being said, right? If I show you these two motors, what are you probably thinking? Because what you're probably thinking is, oh, that's a Marco, or oh, that's a, we don't know, it's just something. Or you might be thinking that's a Marco too, which you're probably wrong twice. So right now, both of these motors are presumed to be Marco. Some people think that the Super Electric one is made by Super Electric, which I'm going to talk about more as well. And some people think that no one makes that motor, it's just unknown. It's kind of a mess, right? So now I'm going to debunk the Marco theory. Now, everyone that I know seems to think that this is a Marco. I don't know why. That must have been some rumor or someone said that and it spread around like wildfire, because there is really no evidence to prove that that's a Marco motor. Now, you're probably laughing at me right now because you've heard this at some point. You said, oh, that's a Marco motor because so-and-so said it in this video 10 years ago, so they're obviously correct. But no one's ever stopped to sit down and challenge, is that really a Marco motor, right? Just because some guy on the internet said it was, are they correct? Where did they get their information from? Where is the evidence, right? And at the end of the day, why does this matter? Well, this matters because it's kind of a misconception, and since the beginning, I've always wondered, is that really a Marco motor? Because I, be on YouTube and I'm watching all these fan videos for years and years and years, and with all the information I've collected, it just doesn't make sense to me, Whereas other people seem to be like, oh, that's just a Marco because someone said something and I believe it. So I'm not trying to say it's not. I'm not trying to say it is. I'm just trying to make you think a little bit. Is it really a Marco motor, or are you just saying that because someone told you it was, right? So, and again, I'm making this video mostly because no one's ever talked about this before, and it's kind of irritating. It's like, has really nobody noticed that that's the same motor design? That's the same rear plate. This is not an edit. This is not anything. They are the exact same, detail for detail, literally. It's just weird. So that's why we're going to talk about everything related to these motors. And the first thing I want to talk about to debunk the Marco theory is, first thing, it doesn't make any sense if you really think about it. And I'm going to pull up the fan motor book here. If you look at the 70s Marco and you look at the 90s Marco, they look pretty similar, right? Now, I just finished watching a video from Spatsbear. It was the Park Lane 1974 made by Lasco box fan or whatever. And he had the Marco motor in there taken apart, and also I could see the cables it was using. And for some reason, it used one of those weird ribbon cables where the wires are kind of glued together, right? Now, if you look, the 90s Marcos also do the same thing. The 80s ones don't do that, and you can literally see it. There's no ribbon wire in there, right? It's just, what? And here's another thing. If Marco made metal motors in the 70s and metal motors in the 90s, why the heck would they just suddenly make plastic motors in the 80s? I just don't understand. Like, I don't get it. No one's ever done that before, right? No one's ever drastically changed the design of their motor, let alone the material, for a decade for no reason. It just doesn't make any sense. And not to mention, there's another plastic motor that no one's talking about either. So you have this one right here, but then there's another one right there. There's the second version of it. So it's like, hello, there's now two of them. Now, I actually have both plastic motors. My Sirius fan has this one down here, and obviously that's the one that has the one on the top. I think that's really weird that there's two different versions, so that also doesn't make sense. So not only does Marco allegedly change their material from metal to plastic, but they also change the design from something that might be stolen, right? If whoever made this might have stolen this from Super Electric, we don't know. And then they might have changed the design because there could have been a lawsuit that I can't find. So we don't know. So that's kind of my first point. It just doesn't make any sense if you think about it, right? If I'm a motor company, why would I just suddenly start making plastic motors and risk whatever with my company, right? I would not do that. Yeah, so that's all the ribbon wire, plastic all of a sudden. All right, now, so the next thing, so you're probably thinking, well, who cares? Maybe it's just a coincidence. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. But here's one point that I came up with these Marco motors, these plastic motors, and the actual Marco motors is, how come there's such a weird startup sound with the plastic ones, but there is no startup sounds with the other ones, the metal ones, right? Now you're probably, who cares about the startup sound, right? Well, here's why. The startup sound has something to do with the windings and stator, as well as the blade set, right? Now, I know the the fans with the metal blades tend to make different types of startup sounds because the blades will emit motor noises differently because of the material of the blade set, right? Like plastic blades don't really give off a startup sound, whereas the metal blade fans can give off some crazy startup sounds. But here's what's weird. The plastic motors seem to give off startup sounds just by themselves. It doesn't even matter if there's metal or plastic blades. They just seem to emit their own sound, which is kind of unheard of, you know, kind of strange. And before anyone says something about the blade set, I did a blade swap, I'm sorry. I took a 90s Marco, this one right here in the middle, the gray one, and I put that exact blade set on that motor, and there was no startup sound still. So it was not the blades. And I did vice versa. I put the blades from the Marco motor onto this fan, and guess what? There was a startup sound. A pretty loud one. Now, it's not just my fans, right? Because this one and the Sirius fan do the same thing. If you go on YouTube, look at any fan with a plastic motor, this type of plastic motor, and it will make one of those weird startup sounds. They're very known for that, right? The plastic motors just tend to make really nice sounding startup sounds, right? Well, what doesn't make any sense is the 70s and 90s Marcos don't make any startup sounds at all, really. And just like I said about Spat Spear's video with the 1974 Parklane, I did watch that video, and I had full volume and everything, and I listened. When he turned the fan on high, there was no startup sound. Explain that to me. I mean, come on. Now, that right there, that should just be enough evidence, because if you, let's just take a bit of a pause. I know I'm talking fast here. Let's take a bit of a pause, right? Let's think about McMillan, right? Let's look at McMillan's history. We start with McMillan from the 70s all the way down to the late 80s with the weird half-size shaft motors that are like 1.7 amps and they're crappy, right? They all make the same startup sound. They have that like little whine in the beginning. They're not really that loud. They're very quiet startup sounds, right? Look at Westinghouse motors. Westinghouse motors almost never make any startup sounds. It's rare that they make a startup sound, let alone metal or plastic blades. Right? So why is it that Marco all of a sudden has all these drastic changes, right? If you really think about it and you put startup sounds and the plastic material together, does it really any make sense at all? It does not. Period. You start off with a metal Marco 70s motor right here. It makes no startup sounds. It's made out of metal. It looks like this. And then you go right over to here. Suddenly it's plastic. Suddenly no more ribbon wires. Suddenly got the really weird startup sounds. I mean, what? And then we go back to the 90s, right? And then it's like, oh, well, it's metal and ribbon wire, no more startup sounds. Why is there so many changes, right? I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, another big point is if Marco does make this motor, now keep in mind, Marco is a reliable company, right? For the most part, their motors are pretty good. So why would they, of all people, would steal from Super Electric, or vice versa? Maybe Super Electric stole from them, we don't know. But this happened, right? This design is, one of these either stole from each other or this was not patented, so we don't know. Yeah, so take it as you will, but honestly, like I said, all these interesting points. The startup sounds alone should just be enough to kind of convince you, is it really a Marco motor? Because that alone doesn't make any sense, period. I can't even think, I've been collecting fans for like, what, 10 years now at least? I cannot think of a single reason why the startup sounds would suddenly change. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all, right? And another thing to think about, that's unheard of. How many fan motors that you know about have drastic startup sound changes, right? I mean, Edison went through evolution too. Look at Edison. I mean, they're not, you know, they started out with these and they went down to these. There are no startup sounds here at all, right? It's consistent. And if you look at the motors, they still match. For the most part, they look similar. And another thing is they're both badged as Edison. So, I mean, yeah. Now, another thing that, whatever, now moving on to the third part, because now we kind of debunk the Marco theory, which I really wanted to highlight in this video, because that's just a misconception. You know, maybe I am wrong, maybe I am right, I don't know. But I have yet to see evidence to prove that, and I don't know. It's just kind of irritating when everyone agrees on something that no one knows about. It's just kind of weird, you know. So then you have the Super Electric. So now let's talk about this one over here. So what's going on here? So if we look at the stators of the fans, which you can't see, I mean, I guess I can to do some wizardry to get up in here. Okay, look at the windings, right? So now we have a white-looking-ish stator. That might even be plastic, I have no idea. Windings are a little bit wide. There is no tape. I looked in the inside of the 70s Marco. They look a little similar, I'll give you that, but the windings are not the same at all. They're different looking. And there's tape on them and whatever. And another thing is the rotors don't match either. The rotor from the 70s Marco has 9 holes, and this one only has 6, like the average. So that alone does not make any sense. Now you get over here, Super Electric. Super Electric has tape on the windings. That's got the green stator, which, if you remember in the beginning, I talked about Super Electric having the metal motor. Their metal motor has the same type of windings and the same stator with the green color. So that's just something to think about, right? Just something to think about, right? So that's the stators, because I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, you didn't look at the stators or the windings. Well, now you just saw them. And like I just said with the Super Electric is, if you look at the earlier 70s Super Electric metal motor, they had the same color stator, right? It's green, and they have the same type of windings, right? Got tape on them, wider windings. Now, if you look at Macmillan again, I love using Macmillan as a base example because they're just like the prime example of a motor company, right? They've used blue colored stators throughout. They have a relatively similar winding size. The only thing that kind of changed for Macmillan is their early square stators don't really had the tape on them, and then the later ones don't. But that's really it. Right? Macmillan was mostly consistent, and so was Westinghouse for the most part. Even Westinghouse series motors too, as well as the original Westinghouse motors. They're all consistent. Alright, now another thing I want to talk about for Super Electric, which is this one again, to remind you. Because I know someone's gonna be like, well, what if that's a Super Electric motor? That's not a Super Electric motor, and I'm gonna tell you why. Super Electric, this was a smaller company. They were sold mostly in the Midwest. They were more of an unknown fan brand, right? I didn't even know about Super Electric until like a few years ago, really, if I'm being honest. I mean, they're kind of hard to find fans. They're a smaller company, so why would Lasko randomly crawl over to another fan company to ask for motors, right? It just doesn't make sense at all. And another thing is Super Electric always, since they're metal bladed fans, they've used the smaller shaft, the skinnier one or the half-size shaft. They've used the smaller ones, so that means Lasko would have had to change to a smaller shaft as well. And another thing to debunk that theory, these fans, this is 1977, this is 1980. They're only 3 years apart. Because I know someone's going, whoa, one of them's 10 years older. No, it's not. They're 3 years apart. And they would have had the same stator if it was the same motor. So they're not the same motor, which that debunks that pretty easily. Now, I want to talk about the design theories. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, who cares about the stators? Who cares about the windings? Who cares about Marco? Who cares about Super Electric? Let's talk about the design, right? Now, my theory on this is it's probably not patented. I can't even pronounce that. Which means that the design is not locked to a company, which means that it's open for use and anyone could probably use it. So that could be something. And then another one that could explain this situation is maybe one of these two companies stole from each other, right? Maybe Super Electric stole from here, or maybe whoever made this stole from here. We don't know. Now, considering this fan's in 77, this fan's in 80, I'm 99% sure that the Super Electric started the plastic motor thing. I'm pretty sure they were the first to have that, right? As far as these two go, I don't care. Well, there's a Canadian fan company that did this thing. No, I don't care about that. I'm talking about these two fans only. I think Super Electric, between the two, done it first, right? I think Lasko, maybe in 1979, started doing the plastic motor thing, and Super Electric started doing it in like 76, 77. So, something to think about. Alright, now the last part of this video. What is my opinion? You're about, oh, you're going to sit here and make all these statements about whatever. What do you think? Okay, I'm going to give you my thoughts. Here are my thoughts about the plastic motor theory. Honestly, I think what happened with my opinion here, oh my god, I can't even talk. One thing to think about if you look at these two fans is Lasko, right? If you think about Lasko long and hard, you'll know that they're a cheapskate company, right? Their fans are built, you can even see it right there. Look at the grills, they're all yellow and falling apart. And they're known for doing that. Their materials are trash, right? This motor in particular had cracked and broken. That's only held together by some like JB Weld, right? I mean, Lasko is known for that. They're a cheapskate company, and that's why Lasko, even 50 years later, is on top of everybody, right? Lasko's thing was just make fans cheaper, right? That's how they beat Lakewood, they beat Holmes, they beat everybody. I mean, Lasko killed everyone on the market. They killed Edison. They even killed Super Electric. I mean, they beat everybody by miles, right? Because in the 70s and 80s, Lakewood was kind of the one holding on to the trail. You know, they were the one leading everything. And Lasko kind of swooped up underneath them, and that's because their fans were cheaper and customer would look for a cheaper fan, more or less. And Lasko just find all these little nitpicky things to make their fans cheaper, and still was able to beat Lakewood in the process. Now, you're probably thinking, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if Lasko wants things cheaper, they're gonna, pay for cheaper parts, right? So they pay for cheaper parts, they make more profit on selling the fan for either the same price, or even if they lower the price, they can still make a little bit of profit because the cost to make the fan is now less, right? So my guess is they have an unknown motor company make that motor. My verdict for the plastic motor in there is that no one really knows who makes this motor. It's unknown. It could have been stolen from someone else. It could be a fan company or a motor company that we already know of, and we just don't know who. We don't know. My guess is because Lasko is not going to have their fans have a problem, right? They need a reliable motor company. So I doubt it's going to be anyone small or unknown. I'm guessing it's probably another fan company that made these motors, and we just don't know who. Oh, another thing I want to talk about too with these motors is Sears. People think that Sears made these motors. I actually used to think that when I was little. I don't know why. Sears did not make these motors. If you think Sears made these motors, then you should probably leave this video, because this is not for you. Sears did not make these motors. That makes no sense anywhere. Doesn't add up to anything. And we all know when Sears tried to make their own fans back in the 70s, the ugly brown Kenmore fans, they had Fasco motors, which, again, I'll show the fan book, not trying to flex here. Sears, when they made their own fans, were using Fasco motors or the General Electric Fireball. Is this going to focus? They either use Fireball motors or the Fasco. So Sears has never been known for making their own motors, as believable as it might want to be. So like I said, this is probably made by some unknown or smaller fan company. We don't know. We don't know who makes those motors, and we probably will never know. Right? They've never been tagged. There's no... I've done research. I can't find any records of anything with this patent. So, I don't know. And as far as Super Electric, the verdict on that is, honestly, I strongly believe, and I still do, and even this motor kind of proves it, I think Super Electric made their own motors. And some people do think that too. I've heard that theory before, and I agree with that theory a lot, because Super Electric's motors are consistent. Like I said, the metal and the plastic ones right here, they match. The stators and windings, they match. They look the same. They look like it's the same person behind the scenes. And this motor in particular has a Super Electric sticker on the side. I would show you, but I think it's on the bottom. It's all... I'm not going to do all that for no reason. But like I said, this motor has the sticker on it. So it's got the sticker that brands it as Super Electric. And they're consistent with their motor styles. So honestly, with all that in mind, I think they make their own motors. And Lasko, we don't know who makes those motors. We just don't know anything. I honestly don't think it's Marco. That just doesn't make any sense. And if someone wants to say otherwise, feel free to say anything you want in the comments. But if you're going to say a statement, at least try to have some evidence or try to back up your claims so we could try to, debunk this at some point. But I don't know. That's my thoughts. If you guys enjoyed this video, I'll see you guys in the next one.